managerial accounting cost behavior. Now, let's look at this set of data for cost behavior. Notice we've got the same three levels of activity that we've been dealing with when we looked at variable cost and fixed cost. But look at the total cost column that we're given. At 100 units, our total cost is $700. But at 200 units, our total cost is $1,400. Now, if this were a purely variable cost, this total would have doubled from $700 to $1,400. So the total cost is increasing, and as we go on down to 300, we see it move. The total cost changes from $1,200 to $1,700. So as activity increases from 100 to 300 units, the cost is also increasing, but it is not increasing in proportion to the change in activity. So this has the appearance of being a variable cost, but the cost behavior doesn't demonstrate that direct and in proportion to change in activity that total cost is supposed to show. Now, let's also look at the per unit information. If this were a purely variable cost, that per unit cost would be the same at each of the three activity levels. But we notice that it isn't the same. It goes from $7 per unit at 100 units to $6 per unit at 200 and to $5.67 at 300 units. So that has the appearance of being a fixed cost because the per unit cost declined as activity went up. So that appears to be a fixed cost. What we've got here, because the total does actually change, and the per unit changes inversely with the change in activity, what we actually have is what is called a mixed cost. Mixed costs such as shipping, our copier lease, utilities, mixed costs have a variable element that causes the total cost to change directly with the change in activity. So the total cost went from $700 to $1,700 as activity went from 100 to 300. But mixed costs also have a fixed cost element that causes the per unit, or because it is partly fixed, the per unit cost will decline as activity goes up. Now, with mixed cost, the way these are graphed, it actually is going to look, let's see, at 100 we had $700, so that was about right here. At 200 it was $1,200, also about right there. And at 300 units our total cost was $1,700, so about right there. So our total cost line again appears to be a straight line, and if we draw a line that connects these dots, our total cost line is going to intersect the vertical axis not at zero like our variable cost did, and it's not going to be a straight line across parallel with the horizontal axis like our fixed cost. It's going to intersect the vertical axis somewhere above zero. And this point where it intersects, in this case, looks to be about $200, maybe $250. That is our fixed cost portion of the mixed cost. And the change in the total cost line from this point of intersection, this change is our variable cost portion. Now, from looking at this data, we don't really know exactly what, we've got an approximation here from graphing it, that our fixed cost is approximately $250, but that was just eyeballing it with a not too straight line. And we also don't know exactly what our variable cost per unit is. So the next thing that we're going to look at is separating this mixed cost into its fixed and variable components, because until we know how much of this mixed cost is variable per unit and how much is fixed cost that will not change in total as activity changes, then we cannot accurately predict how cost will behave as activity changes. So that's the next thing we're going to do.